love, more joy, everything.
It's inspired young people.
Inspiration comes from within you. When you clear out the garbage that's in your mind, you then create space for something better, more beautiful to come in.
Let's have life and have it more abundantly.
I say yes.
It's like taking a workshop. I get to be in my pajamas.
We have a very active imagination, which is why it's important to learn how to harness it and then point it in the direction you want to go.
I listen to your show every day.
It's time now for Living Your Inspired Life with Susan Burrell. Susan is no-nonsense, inspirational, motivational, and fun.
This is positive talk radio.
Practical wisdom for everyday life.
It's a gift you give yourself.
Now, here's Susan.
And welcome to Living Your Inspired Life. You're listening to News Talk 1590 KVTA. And at the top of every show, I just remind the listeners, you guys out there, to go to livingyourinspiredlife.org and check out all the amazing work we've been doing up until today. And I'm guaranteeing, before we've even begun, that this is going to be a very interesting and juicy conversation I'm about to have. But go to livingyourinspiredlife.org. Check out all the amazing work. And if you have a question or there's something more you want to see happening there, send me an email. You can do it through the website, livingyourinspiredlife.org. So, yet again, I am just gifted with amazing authors that are out there doing some really deep and incredible and awesome work. And so today's author is no different. So I want to welcome Rhys Thomas. Rhys, thanks for joining me.
Hi, Susan. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So the name of the book that you've just written is called Discover Your Purpose: How to Use the 5 Life Purpose Profiles to Unlock Your Hidden Potential and Live the Life You Were Meant to Live. And that's a chewy sentence right there.
That is. But it does say it all.
It really does. And I got to tell you, as I said before we went on air, I've been reading the book. And I'm just going to tell our listeners at the get-go, and I don't always do this, but this book is really, it's chock full of not only information, but exercises you can do and some guided meditations that are actually, I've done a couple of, they're very, very useful in digging down deep into discovering what your purpose is.
Absolutely. The book is actually a tiny slice. It is the foundational slice, but a tiny slice of what I teach in my 3-year energy medicine training school, and it is it's something that I sort of hid for years from the world because I thought I was running a mystery school, and only the people that came to me would be able to get these secrets. But then a few folks reminded me that, well, if it's really good for everybody, let's get it out to everybody. So I wrote the book, and yeah, there's a lot in there. There's a lot of really good foundational work, especially for people that have done some work and really have found that they've been able to start living more in their purpose, and then they realize how delicious it is to live in their purpose. And then they want to know how to do it even more and how to go even deeper into it and how to live it every day.
You know, it's interesting as I was, because I have, like we kind of shared briefly, I have done quite a bit of internal personal work on myself, and as I was reading this book, I'm like, there are certain things that I want to dig into as we have our conversation, Rhys, but there were certain ideas that just shifted my perception just 1 degree, and all of a sudden there was like light at the end of the tunnel. Oh, that's what that was that I was dealing with, and oh, that's who I am. No wonder. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, it's nice, and it doesn't take a huge shift. I don't think enlightenment. When people say they want to be enlightened, I don't think enlightenment is a huge shift from where we already are. But like you said, it's a few degrees, but a few degrees can make all the difference in the world. 2 degrees away, you're looking at someone else, and 2 degrees this way, and you're looking directly at yourself.
Yeah, and what's interesting is, as you're saying that, is that what I'm noticing in all the circles that I interact with and run in is that this idea of enlightenment, which used to be you had to climb to the top of a mountain and meditate on your belly button for centuries, right?
Right.
Be in a monk cave or whatever, is actually an everyday occurrence that's happening among hundreds of thousands of people now, which is very exciting to be the people like you and I out there teaching modalities to escort people into their life purpose and their truth.
Yeah, I totally agree. And what's interesting, because we use many different energy medicine modalities and techniques to sort of help people achieve this awareness inside themselves. And the trickiest part about enlightenment is that we're led to believe by Hollywood and gurus that are sort of shadow gurus that it will be this sort of like complete bliss where you and the universe are one, and you're talking to angels and all this craziness. But the truth is that when you're in the enlightened state, you don't even notice.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's who you are.
Right, because you're living it.
And when who you are is effortless, it doesn't actually feel like anything. You only feel when you resist your life.
Well, can I read a quote from your book, Rhys?
Oh, sure.
Discover Your Purpose, because this caught my attention. Of course, it caught my attention. In it, you said, the energy you need to live your life purpose comes from a much deeper channel in which you fearlessly challenge limiting beliefs and life patterns based on self-rejection, and you stand up once again for your highest truth. And that just like resonated with me, because there's this whole idea of, challenging your belief systems, changing what you think, and then your life, like you just said, then you live in bliss. But it really is about looking at yourself and how in my life I have definitely like shut myself down and limited and rejected. Oh no, I couldn't possibly be that kind of a person. I'm a nice person, that kind of stuff. And then the idea of standing up. Just standing up and saying, okay, this is who I am.
Yep.
Good, bad, ugly. So how did you develop this method? And let's talk a little bit about the energy medicine, because you've mentioned, I doubt my listeners even have an idea of what that is.
An idea of what energy medicine are like, let's see, like Ayurvedic medicine or acupuncture.
Mm-hmm.
There are various different. There's a certain amount of energy medicine in massage and in sound healing. People do sound healing. There are many different types of modalities, from shamanism to various different forms of Gestalt type therapy that are more getting into the core feeling of a person and or primal scream type things. People get out and scream, and there's lots of different ways to do things. My work came from two psychiatrists, Alexander Lowen and Wilhelm Reich, who back in the late 20s thought that the world was crazy to be following Freud, who thought that you could run your life from your brain, because they knew that the brain is ultimately the problem. As Einstein said, the same brain that creates the problem can't solve it. So if you're trying to solve your problems from your brain, it's gonna be a long road to hoe. And they were noticing that the body itself held an enormous wisdom, and they, back in the 30s, discovered they were working with patients in sanitariums, but they were noticing that people would go into panic and into their greatest defense and illness in very specific ways. They found that there were 5 specific ways that people actually went crazy, and then they started noticing that there were 5 specific body types that went with those. And then they noticed that all of the people with certain body types all got wounded around certain issues. And they started formulating this idea that there were actually 5 different types of character structures, which they called character structures. And then they noticed that if you've got people in certain levels of panic or distress, or stress, they would be able to work with them in a specific way, and they could get them back up to coping again. When I learned the modality in learning energy medicine, it was one of the foundational elements that they used. It wasn't they primarily used what are called chakras, but this was one of the elements. And when I saw this, I realized that since I've been a teacher my whole life, and I had always worked with my students and competitive. I worked with a lot of competitive players, both in the national, juniors, and professional levels, and I also played professional tennis and was a second-degree black belt in martial arts. And I was really interested in the core, sort of not teaching anybody some cookie-cutter way of doing things, which I've never been able to do myself.
Right.
But just sort of looking at what is this person's true nature. And then I noticed that everybody has a unique true nature, and yet there are some people that are very aggressive, and there's other people that are very, they work really well with others, and there's some people that are very gentle and emotional, and there's other people that are incredibly disciplined and organized, and then there are other people that are just that when you're talking to them, they don't seem to even be there. They're not even paying attention, and each one of those needed to be. I was developing different systems to coach them in being as good as they could be in their tennis game, as well as in their life. I always was more interested in people having fun in their life than winning a tennis match. But in doing that, I started really looking at psychology and quantum physics and biomechanics, and started noticing that there were definitely these changes. And when I went through my life, I had tried to be what I would call in my book a knowledgeable achiever, a person who, like I learned at an early age that boys are supposed to be achievers, and they're supposed to be competitive in sports, and they're supposed to be out there, and they're supposed to put a smile on and deal with things and not have very much emotion, but get the job done. And I spent about 35 years of my life absolutely sure that that's the person I was because, well, I was okay at it. I did it okay. I was competitive in sports. I was a martial artist. I was a top tennis instructor in the nation. I was a national speaker for the tennis industry, and I started my own company to develop a product that taught you how to be more coordinated, and I was doing all these things, and yet I always felt like there was something big missing. And by the time I was in my 30s, I noticed that the board at the country club didn't understand me. My spouse didn't understand me. I didn't feel like I was understood by my spouse. I didn't feel like I was connecting. I didn't feel like I was being a great parent, which was really, the thing that really sort of drove me to sort of find something else. Why can't I connect at a deeper level? And then I was also having health issues. So I started trying alternative medicine, and I found a healer a woman who worked in energy work and also was a psychotherapist, and mixed the two together. And I realized, and she said, well, she went to this school, and there was another school similar to that in Connecticut. And I went to the school, and the very first class, the teacher came over and put her arm around me and looked up at the ceiling and said, "Oh, Rhys, do you think you're going to come in and join us?" And I'm thinking, hey, I'm a black belt in martial arts, a pro tennis player, I'm national speaker, I've got all this stuff, and she pointed out that I had never actually been in my body and never really existed as I am. I was existing in my mind as the person I thought I was supposed to be.
Oh my gosh, that's huge.
And then I brought that back, and I was working with hundreds of people, and then I started doing my own workshops around energy work, and I started noticing that there were very few people. I only knew two, as a matter of fact, that I really felt had a full concept of who they were. Everybody else had a little piece of it, but they were living on partial knowledge of themselves, and there was a deep unawareness of their true greatness. And then working with this Alexander Lowen system, where there are 5 qualities. There are creative people, there are feeling people, there are caretaking people, there are achieving people, and there are leadership type people. I started recognizing that rather than trying to get them from panic to coping, I like there was more, teaching them that to go deeply into themselves, even though they were coping and making good money and doing well in the world, there was so much more. There was so much more energy and excitement and enthusiasm that they could, and passion that they could have for their lives by discovering even a deeper purpose outside of their external purpose. There was an internal purpose of expressing, this quality. And I always use Martin Luther King as my favorite healer because I don't remember him putting anybody on a healing table, but he did stand up and model for people what I think healing is. Healing modalities, which are called energy medicine techniques, are great for removing pain and blocks in the energy system, which lead to you not being healthy. But the real healing happens when you're around a person who's fearless about being who they are. And someone like a Martin Luther King or a Gandhi, or these people that have really stood up at the national level and said, the integrity within you is the only thing that counts. And I think every great leader says that and models it. And when we're around people that model their core quality, this unique core quality that they have, it gives us permission to do it ourselves.
Right. I totally agree with that. And that goes back to that quote I read from your book, Standing Up for Your Highest Truth.
Right.
So let's dive into a bit of what these profiles are that are in your book, Discover Your Purpose, because they were fascinating to me. And then, well, hold on. Let me rethink that. Let's talk about, okay, one of the chapters is having the courage to see your defenses. And you started with that before you got to the profiles. So let's deal with that, because I heard you say just now is, instead of looking at these character structures or profiles from it's broken, you were looking at it from, wow, look at these people that are already doing some amazing things and achieving, and what else can I do to support them in becoming more of who they are?
Right.
Which is a much more positive way.
Yeah, because I really had felt like I was, doing really good things in the world, and I was certainly, I was sharing Wayne Dyer and Tony Robbins and all sorts of great thinkers I was reading and sharing with my clients and motivating people and inspiring people. But I forgot that, I think I put in one of my Facebook posts the other day after Wayne Dyer had died, I said that when I was younger, when I was in my 20s and 30s, and literally had listened to everything, all of his audios, and read all his books, and I was absolutely convinced I wanted to be the next Wayne Dyer. And it wasn't until I took this course that I realized that I really wanted to be the next Rhys Thomas. And
thank God.
And it really, when we realize that that's actually something worth attaining, because we can feel in us that there's a greatness, that's when things change. When we're thinking about who we're supposed to be, when we have our belief systems about who we're supposed to be, based on how we had to cope in our family, based on what we had to do to get by in our lives, it's very difficult to access that level of courage and energy that you would need to actually stand up to a world in which nobody in the world actually wants you to be who you are.
Right.
I mean, they ultimately need you to be who you are, so you can give them permission. But everybody who knows you wants you to be what they want you to be because it's convenient for them.
Well, and what I notice is if I begin to become more me, when I live more me, people around me get really uncomfortable. Yep. And envious and a little intimidated, and that's not who I am, but that's their reaction to me. And
there are other people that you are in sort of maybe family relationships with who, because you told them the old story about who you are, and they like that story because part of the reason you told that story to them was because it made them like you more. And when you tell your parents or your brothers, sisters, family that, you know what, I wasn't totally telling you the truth my whole life. This is actually who I am. They may have some resistance to that because it's very convenient for you to be that other person for them. And when you change and when you have a different opinion and when you don't buy their story anymore, it can be a little bit challenging. And yet, it takes one person in a family to do it, and then everybody else begins to realize, wow, I've got more in me too.
Well, hopefully they do. Otherwise, in my personal experience, I'm dealing with one individual in my family, and not so much because she really doesn't like that I'm being exactly who I am,
Right.
And so then you just have to, I don't know, deal with
Yeah,
that, right?
I mean, it just means that she's, that a lot of people are really invested. I mean, basically, keep in mind, all wars in the world are not based on anybody in their core would never have a war.
Exactly.
So wars are based on a false sense of self that you put out in front of you, and when someone challenges it, then you go to war because I'm telling you that's who I am, and you better believe it. But the truth is, when you are in your core and someone challenges who you are, you just smile, like, oh, really? I'm pretty sure. I can really feel that this is who I am. I really enjoy this who I am. And if you can't see it, that's really sad because it's really kind of fun. You ought to try it.
Right. And I think that is something that trips up this one individual because then she thinks that she's going to have to do the work. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
And
Right.
and she doesn't want to.
Yeah, and
there are
you don't
people
need
like
to,
that
you
that don't want to.
Well, and keep in mind that the greatest healers don't tell you to do anything; they just model it. They just model it, and they're there for you. So yeah, and it's hard. It's hard, especially if it's family. Sometimes they just can't let go because they like you to be as in the battle like they are.
Right. So I want to read another quote from your book, Rhys.
Yeah.
I may be jumping ahead with this quote, but I think it's going to set the tone for talking about looking at your defenses.
Yeah.
So you said, to be experienced accurately, your true self must be felt as fresh and new in each moment, like an infant in the ecstasy of playfully being alive. I love that. Such felt awareness brings to you what is not solid but formless and flowing, touching on your true identity, which is made up of your core soul profile qualities as expressed through your unique profile. And I love the felt awareness that you mentioned there because I think a lot of people are not necessarily feeling aware or alive or even playful.
Right. Well, most people are trying to be adults.
Yeah. Oh, that's a bummer,
and
isn't
one
it?
one of the exercises that I have in the book is called The Secret Place. It's very powerful, and it is really my gift to therapists all over. All the therapists that I work with that use that find that they accelerate their ability to get people to relive, to re-experience their true energy level. And the short explanation of the exercise is that you go back in your childhood and you find where you love to play, sort of around your house, or maybe it was at the beach or someplace where you would go, and it would be sometime maybe between the age of 4 and say 10, where you would go, and you might have stayed, continue to do that through your teens, but mostly it's in that range from 4 to 10. Where it would be like a tree. I had a tree that I would always climb up, and like a really, really big tree, like an 80-foot tall pine tree, and I would be up in the very top boughs of the tree, and it's when swinging back and forth in the wind, and I just always felt like I was flying, and I had another one where I was a place where I would go and sit in a sort of rocky knoll, and there were always sticks and leaves and various things that had fallen into this sort of rocky area, and I would sit there and I would make superheroes all the time, just constantly making superheroes, imagining what they could do and make up different ones and all these different things, and now now in my life, my mission in life is to help people fly and not crawl like a caterpillar, but really teach people that they are butterflies, that they have this enormous spirit within them that can fly in so many ways, and if nothing else, just to enjoy their life. And then I also run my school, the Rhys Thomas Institute, where I teach all of these techniques, to people. And what I'm actually doing is every person graduates in sort of a mastery level where they discover their greatness and they discover their superhero, and that's actually in the second year they have to pick their superhero name and recognize that they've already had that their whole life, and so to really embody that quality is something that a child can do. An adult can't do that, And it's interesting. As I've been doing a lot of thinking about this and sharing with lots of people since the book has been out. I've also I would have written this in the book, but I'm sort of in a flow of consciousness, sort of always coming up with new things, and that's the next book. But the idea that being an adult is actually incredibly a childish notion, because the only people that create the idea of an adult are children, who the people are three times as tall as they are, and they seem to have their life together, or at least they're really stern about who they think they are, and we're like, oh my God, so we should be more like that, and that's called an adult. And so we create in our child mind what an adult is, and then we set about throughout our lives trying to become an adult.
Oh my God, Rhys, that's brilliant. I just had another shift in perception. That's brilliant. Yes, that's exactly what happens.
And yet the child already knew who they were.
Uh-huh.
And so when we come in, there's one thing I talk about in the book, which is the moment where psychologists talk about the core wound as are terrible events that happen to you, and that's what Lowen and Wilhelm Reich had talked about, that there was a certain wound that then triggered certain behaviors from then on. But I don't think so. I think the biggest wound with people is that they come into the world, and when you come into the world, you are literally non-form. You would never name yourself a boy or a girl.
Right.
You would never give yourself a name like Rhys and a last name and a location like we live in this town and this is how we all behave and this is how those are all sort of rigid adult control ideas. Children are literally non-form. They don't think about themselves having hands and arms. Their hands and arms just pick things up and throw things and play with things and run around, and they're mostly non-form. They're enjoying the flow of life and until they're, say, 2, 3, 4 years old, and then at that point, the parents are catching their attention, saying, "Look at me, focus on me. I'm mommy. You're Rhys. This is what the way the world is. This is the way you behave. Boys wear this color, girls wear this color, this," and all of these rules, all of this, what Don Miguel Ruiz calls domestication,
right,
comes in, and we get domesticated into being a certain thing. And the way and the impossible wound is that at some point we have to make the impossible choice between being who we really are, which is this wonderful, playful, childlike, what we call childlike, but it's really just huge energy system that's open to everything. Either choose that or choose being loved. And getting attention.
Oh, that hurts my heart when you say that.
But we all have to do it because the parents are in that place where they need you to conform. They need you to learn English or Spanish or whatever they're teaching you. They need you to learn the language, and you need to learn the language that they believe in. So the words have to mean what they have the words mean. And so you learn all of these things to be someone that you're supposed to be. And each time you choose to let go a little bit more of that freedom within you, and choose to be always put family first, never show your emotions, always have a smile on, be nice to other people, say nice things, never say something bad to other people. Whatever it happens to be, and these become not just belief systems, but they become these hardwired vows where you have to literally, to survive and to be loved and to be taken care of, which a child knows they have to get the parents' attention to be whole. You have to give up these parts, and then that becomes a worldview. It's called a worldview, where it's not like, well, this is just because my mom was like this or like that. You can't tell the difference between the way your mom was. That's just the way the world is. And then that becomes how we make our choices, and then all of our belief systems throughout life are built on those basic self-rejections rather than on the self-acceptance.
Okay, so let's tap on this, because this is the word vow.
Yep.
Making an agreement, or you said it refers to a sacred promise. A vow is something you adhere to, even worship, as something greater than yourself and your ordinary needs. Now, when I was reading that chapter, I was like, oh my goodness. It was like all the pieces in a Tetris puzzle just fell right into place, and I was like, that's it. And I can remember now, it's not wounding that happened in my childhood. Because I was in a good family. Well, okay, there's the judgment. But I can remember.
I had a fantastic family too.
I can remember standing. I 3 years old, and I felt it in my body when I read this chapter. I'm like, that's when I made the agreement. I made the sacred agreement that I would be the caretaker of the entire family.
Yep.
How horrible.
Well,
I mean, it got me to where I am, but
when you did that, the way you went into defense. So your defense was, rather than being the leader that you are, you decided to lead through caretaking. So you decided that you were going to be the people pleaser. So you lived in people pleaser, sort of like, I'm taking care of them.
Well, yeah, and evidently they need, I guess at that small age, I got that they needed my help.
Well, and they did need your help, but what they needed you to do, actually, was to show them what it looks like to be an empowered person.
Right.
And since they didn't model that for you, you didn't know what it looked like either, but you knew somehow that you needed to save them. And because you're a leader, that would be your natural choice. So you didn't actually want to see there. Had you been a real people pleaser, a team player, which is one of the 5 qualities,
right?
You would have just not known what to do, but you would have just helped out wherever you could. But the truth was that you helped out wherever you could, but you did it because you knew that you had to save them, and you had to lead them somehow with your helping.
Well, and we did, I've talked to other women about this too, because I remember, did it because it was expected of me. It's like when I go to somebody's house, I immediately hop up and help clear the dishes, or here, let me do that for you, or because it was expected of me. I was trained that way. It's not necessarily my natural, well, it is now, but it wasn't. Do you know what I mean?
Well, no, and even now it's not your natural. It's that you made a vow to always be good. You vowed to be a good girl. See, did you have brothers? Did you have brothers?
Yeah, I have a younger brother.
They don't do that.
Yeah, he handles things differently.
Right, because he was being a good boy. And good boys aren't supposed to leap up and do the dishes and help mom and do that sort of stuff. Good girls are.
Right.
And so now it's actually an automatic response, because when you don't do it, you feel what happens when you challenge a vow, which is the guilt and shame that ultimately, remember I said that horrible choice between being who you truly are and getting what you really want and enjoying your life individually,
right.
And being loved. Well, when you didn't help at the table, which happened a few times, probably multiple times, if you were a little bit of a charismatic leader child, and then your mom gave you a look, or this is what you do, and if you want anything else to happen in your life, you better fall in line, because this is what girls do. And then you make the vow, and the vow is actually the guilt and shame you feel as an adult when you try to break a vow, is the same guilt and shame that you feel when you were a child around wanting to actually not do it. Right.
And not having the voice or strong enough to say, I'm not going to do that.
Right. And the good news is that when you look back, you can see that when you know you're a charismatic leader, and I mean, so tell me, before I go into this, I see you as having both the knowledgeable achiever and the charismatic leader. So you've got the two strong traits, and the knowledgeable achiever trait within you probably believes that taking care of your family and doing really good things for them, supporting them, is one of the best things you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The charismatic leader, on the other hand, sometimes has a problem with sort of having people depend on you, and really sort of wanting them to be more independent of you, and sort of say, I'd love it if they could just get it and do it themselves.
Yeah.
So
That's actually how I teach. I teach the people that, my clients come to me because they want to shift and stand on their own 2 feet, not because they need somebody holding their hand.
Right. And yet there's a part of you that got into helping people because it was part of your vow to help people.
Yep.
And when you shift it from helping people to inspiring people, that's when you shift into your core.
Yep. I'm a hell of a lot happier that way. That's for sure.
That is for sure.
Well, so let's talk about the 5 profiles because I have it.
Yep.
Well, okay, let's talk about the 5 profiles, and I have a question about this. Let me ask you the question first, and then we'll. So say I have one, because in the book you said, so everybody in the book, Discover Your Purpose, there's a questionnaire that you can take to discern what your profile is.
Yeah.
And you said, well, you can have more than one profile. And what was interesting is the one that came up that I had the most marks on,
Yep.
wasn't anything that you just said. It was the emotional intelligence specialist.
Right.
And what was interesting is as I was reading it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is my mother.
And it was and it was also your vow to never be like your mother. Right?
How did you know that?
And so your vow to never be like your mother, this, where she was this, and you're probably talking mostly about the poor me qualities of the emotional intelligence specialist. You vowed never to do that because you have such a strong character. But and this is where the book gets fun, because you take the profile assessment and the first time you take it, often you will test very high on the person that when you look at your behavior.
Right.
And listen, there are some great profiling systems out there. There's the Enneagram, there's Myers-Briggs, there's DISC. There are a whole bunch of these systems that are out there, but they're all behavior-based. And the problem with behavior, as we saw as a child, was we can actually use our cerebral cortex and our brilliant consciousness, or our what we call a conscious mind, to actually be somebody that we aren't until we believe that's who we are. And then our behaviors will reflect who we believe we are and who we need to be and who we want to try to be. And then when we look back at our lives, we say, well, I did a lot of that, and I did a lot of this, and yes, this is true, and that's true. And so often, you will come up with, as one of the top elements, you'll say, well, God, I scored really high on this. It might not have been number one, but I scored really high on this one, and I don't really see that in myself. I don't really feel like that's my core. Or you'll be working with me or with a teacher, and they'll be like, that's not in there. So here's an interesting side note, which I do talk about in the book when you get to the charismatic leader page. Every charismatic leader has a huge emotional intelligence quality.
Uh-huh.
They have to have the passion because they're born sort of leaders, fighters, seducers. They've got the energy and the depth of feeling. But it's very different than the emotional intelligence specialist, because the emotional intelligence specialist has never hurt a fly.
Oh.
They have never ripped someone's head off. They have never they have never owned their own radio show.
Right. And there were qualities in this. I was like, wow, this person's really nice. Sometimes that's not me,
Right. But sometimes it is. But the key is that it's the sometimes part. And so what you would want to do, so charismatic leaders are tricky because often they will see themselves in all the other profiles but the charismatic leader. Sometimes they'll score even lower in the charismatic leader, but they'll often score high on all of them. And so there's also one designation where you score really high on all of the profiles, and that's the charismatic leader are the natural actors, actresses. They can pretty much take on any of the roles. They're good achievers. They can caretake people at times. They're deeply feeling people. Often they won't see themselves as thinkers because they rarely leave their body, because it's all about, they're more sort of like driven to stay here and fight and be in the game.
Yeah.
But the other ones are totally in there for them, and yet they may not even see themselves as a leader because they grew up in a household where or in a culture where if they're a woman, they were taught that the best thing you can be is a caretaker or a feeling person.
Hello, raising my hand, yeah.
And that's very common. And men are brought up to be the achiever or the leader. But the truth is that we're taught one of the biggest lies that we're taught is that the biggest difference between receiving people are that there are men and there are women, and that and in the energy world, there are things called chakras, and your body is what's called a chakra. It's like a first chakra, and that's the only place that being a man or a woman makes a difference. When it comes to your purpose, there are an even number of creative people, feeling people, caretaking people, leadership people, and achieving people in both men and women. The problem is that society tells all of those hundreds and millions of women who are born leaders and born achievers that if they decide to walk away from the family or from being really soft and loving or being a good wife or things like that, if they walk away and do what they're born to do, that they should feel horribly guilt and shame about that. And they often will have a great career for a while in their 20s, and they'll be just great. And then they get married and they have children, and the vow to be a good mother, they quit their job and they stay at home and they're miserable. And they don't. And even though they become very good mothers, they never feel like their life fulfills again.
Yep, been there.
Yeah,
lived it. Raising my hand.
Yep. And then they hit the midlife crisis and they come see me and I say, that's because you're a leader.
So
that's not how it works. And your children need you to be a leader because that's who you're born to be. And if you aren't modeling who you are, you're telling them it's okay to pretend you're somebody you aren't.
Right. So in these profiles, Rhys, there is what people may say is a fairly positive aspect and then a negative aspect.
Yes.
Or a higher self and a lower self, or a shadow side to all of this. And what's interesting is that you were saying in the book Discover Your Purpose that we really need to be both of those things.
We do.
And because that brings us into that wholeness of purpose. It was interesting because you kept talking about the self-rejection or how you were you vowed not to be this thing, and in the vowing and not to be this thing, you then become the thing you vowed not to be.
Right. Right, because it's the thing you vow not to be is the thing you see in everyone else. You see it and you're angry at it. It's like, I'll never be angry. So you're surrounded by angry people and you see it everywhere else, but you never see it in yourself. I'm not angry. They're the angry ones, even though you talk terribly about them and your anger comes up in such sideways ways, rather than just saying, I'm incredibly angry about this and I'm not putting up with it anymore. Because anger's a really interesting energy. In the East, they call it the most important emotion because anger is the heat you need to make change in your life. The problem is that in the United States, or where I grew up, anger was actually misinterpreted for aggression. And aggression is where you have no sense of self at all. You have some erroneous belief that someone else can actually hurt you or do something that insults you or something. You have this because your mask is out there being told that it's not who it is, and you get angry, and you then project your anger, which would just be really for yourself to your anger should come up to remind yourself that, gee, I'm really stuck in my life. But it comes up, and rather than freeing yourself, you blame someone else, and you use aggression towards others with anger, and that's not really what anger is. That's rage, and that's sort of an impotent kind of an expressing this, where we're lost in our world, rather than a person who's really conscious gets angry a lot because they feel how their own thinking and their own story sort of ties them down and keeps them stuck in their lives. And that's what anger's designed for. It heats your body up and makes you say, I'm ready to change.
So let's talk about beliefs in terms of that too, because then I would imagine the anger is what fuels the ability to change your belief systems. Because you in the book you talked about how vows are similar to beliefs, that they keep you trapped, but beliefs are something that it's a learned behavior. Here's the quote. Beliefs, on the other hand, are cognitive and can be challenged when circumstances clearly do not support them.
Right. And a lot of psychotherapy work and when people are analyzing their lives and looking at it, there's parts of your life that you can say, yeah, that's really not working. And I think I'll try not to do that. Maybe I'll eat less. Maybe I'll do this. But your vow to never be seen as powerful refrigerator unconsciously.
Oh, yeah.
So no matter how much you look at your behavior and have a belief that, well, maybe I ought to change that belief, that core vow that you don't have the right to fill yourself with what you really desire the most, which is passion and love and a great relationship or a fantastic career or great health, that is what ultimately drives the behavior, and it's very unconscious. And then it does create these belief systems that it's okay to just have this cake right now or this whatever it is that then you get out of shape or unhealthy and that sort of thing. So one of the things that I've been in this work in holistic health for over 15 years now, and one of the things that I've discovered is that all illness is based not on the environmental factors, because you look at environmental factors and everybody should be sick if there's environmental factors. Illness comes from the level from not knowing who you are and trying to run your energy through the wrong person. So for instance, I was trying to be this knowledgeable achiever. I'm really this creative idealist. I'm what called the creative idealist, where I just download ideas or just flowing and constantly thinking, and I never give the same speech twice. It's always creative, and I was absolutely trying to be this knowledgeable achiever. Now, part of me had that in me. We all have all of these profiles. We all have what we call the creative idealist. We're all creative. We all have some emotional intelligence specialists. We all have the ability to feel deeply at times. We all care about other people at times, and we support other people at times, and as a team player. We all can achieve. We can all get a decent grade on a test or do something and put our mind to something and achieve things. And we all occasionally lead in some way, or if we can't lead, we at least seduce others into doing some things for us. Mm-hmm. So we have all of these qualities within us, but one of them is how and why we got the body we got and the energy we have and the very specific way that we've been called to our life. And when I was trying to live through this knowledgeable achiever, I didn't have enough energy in my life to really live my purpose, because I was only running on, say, out of 8 cylinders, I was running on 2 cylinders.
I'm hung up because you said body types.
Yes.
So each of these profiles has a body type.
Yes. So let's go through them. Let's go through the profiles. So the first
that might
one
inform
is,
people what their profile is if their body type is a particular makeup.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, and these are there can be slight modifications in certain ones based on whether there's what we call a strong secondary profile in there as well. But generally, the creative idealists are these people that are incredibly creative and artistic or scientific, or and they are really enamored and love their thoughts. They're always they'll read, they'll be studying things, they're very big conspiracy theorists. They're looking at the world from this like huge sort of almost like from outer space type of thinking. And when they are in what we call their defense, when a creative person who's got all that sort of high energy in their thinking is in their defense, they have enormous amounts of anxiety, and they're really worried that they're in danger all the time because they live on planet Earth and they are in danger all the time, and they get that, but they get it sort of at the visceral level. So they have an enormous amount of anxiety and can be sort of ADD or sort of some of these Asperger's, at the extreme level, or autistic, where they're really out of their body, they're really beyond their body, and so but the average person, they just don't spend a lot of time in their body; they're thinking all the time, and so that person tends to be very tall and thin because the energy is moving up, and of course the body forms around the energy. The energy doesn't form around the body forms around the energy. And the energy is vertical. They're trying to leave. They're in. I mean, I guess I'm dating myself with this statement, but they're the beam me up, Scotty.
Right.
They're the ones that love to do spiritual meditation. They love to get out of their body. They love to be anywhere but here on planet Earth. Mm-hmm. And so they tend to be tall and thin, and they take up the least amount of space. And they're much more in touch with their thinking. So then the second person is what we call the emotional intelligence specialist, and those are the ones that you tested very high for because it's a big part of your leader. But they are the most gentle people. They're the ones who would if there were a little bug in the house, they would get it on a little piece of paper. They'd take it outside. They'd talk to it the whole way.
Oh, see, I don't do that, but okay,
right,
go.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. They've never killed and they've never squashed a bug. They've always just, every doggy and kitty, it's just like, oh, then they're so soft and gentle people. Now, there are also people who are incredibly needy because they feel so deeply, so they need love constantly. And they will, if you're in a relationship with them, they'll often say things like, oh, you don't love me anymore, you didn't say you love me, or you didn't hug me, or you didn't, you haven't talked to me in a while. And they can be, in their defense, they can be what we call the poor me. They can be incredibly draining and a real problem, and they can be very manipulative of saying, oh, you complete me, and if you're not with me, I don't feel whole, and you need to be with me all the time, and I need you.
Wow.
So they will be doing that, but in their core, they are genuinely the most unconditionally loving, saint-like people. They're just beautiful, lovely, lovely, lovely people, and their bodies tend to be very soft, sometimes overweight, but generally not overweight. They tend to be very soft belly. They tend to have much more yoga type bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So they're flexible. They would never do martial arts, never do anything hard, no weightlifting, nothing like that. They'd never be interested in that. But things like yoga, flow type of things, tai chi, they're very good at that. But they also just love children. They love the elderly. They are wonderful, wonderful people. And their body types reflect that. They have deep eyes, often watery type of eyes. They have often very well pronounced lips. So that because it's about nurturing for them. It was always about the nurturance, the sort of like the getting nurtured by by the mother, and so they have those qualities. And then the third quality, so think about which ones you are, and people like this.
Right.
The third quality are people that we call the team players, and they tend to be a little squarer in their body. They will sometimes carry some extra weight. They have big, sort of round, happy faces, and just love you more than anything. It's just like they're there for you, and they call you up, and it's like you haven't talked to them in 6 months, and they call you and say, hey, how are you doing? I was just thinking about you, and they have a cell phone that has maybe 200 people on it, and they call every one of them. They love and they take care of people, and they love being around people. They always play on a team. They never want to shoot the goal. They always want to pass the ball when it's time, and they're all about you becoming successful, and they want to find out about you when you talk to them at a party.
It's always asking you the question.
You the question, right? They will. You will be talking the whole time. You realize, oh my God, I just talked to this person for 25 minutes, and I have no idea what's going on in their life at all because they just they're just really interested. They make you interesting, and because
Rhys, I'm sorry,
yeah.
but we have like 2 more minutes left.
Yes. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Okay.
So tell us about the last 2 profiles of body types.
The last two profiles. Well, by the way, the people pleaser, when they're in their defense, feel like doormats, and they get really resentful that nobody else does anything for them, even though they don't let you. And then the last 2 are the knowledgeable achiever, who are the people who are, they got straight A's in school. They often have upper degrees. They work great in corporate. They are, they run their own businesses. They're very efficient and driven. But when they're in their defense, they're incredibly self-critical, and no matter what they do, it's not good enough. They always feel like, oh gosh, I should have known, I should have done better. And then the final one, by the way, the knowledgeable achiever body are the sort of like the triathlete body, lean, strong but muscly, very well balanced bodies, strong legs, no imbalance in the body at all, and have perfect posture. The charismatic leader, on the other hand, can have everything from the movie star body to the Tony Soprano body to to a very skinny, depending upon what their purpose is in life, they're like method actors. So their bodies will reflect that, and they are the ones who can do anything. They are charming. They're big energy. And the key with charismatic leaders is that they're always going to lead, and they'll either be a fantastic example or a terrible warning, and there's no in between with them.
Interesting. That's very interesting. You're laughing. Okay, Rhys. So you have a website too. Tell everybody the website.
I do. To buy the book, the best way to buy the book is to go to discoveryourpurposebook, all one word, .com, which is a website page that I have where you'll still buy the book through Amazon, but when you go and order through my page, you will get all kinds of bonuses. So you don't want to miss that. There's some keynote talks that I do that I give you, some video. There's all kinds of stuff. There's a member site that you can listen to the meditations on, and so you don't want to miss that. And then the other way to find me is Rhys, RHYS, ThomasInstitute.com. That's my school, and there's all sorts of stuff that I do through that. And if you get on our mailing, we offer all kinds of other types of transformational work.
Rhys Thomas, thank you so much for joining us on Living Your Inspired Life. And I'm telling everybody, Discover Your Purpose by Rhys Thomas. This is a book that I would recommend you have in your library, because I can see that I'm going to be going back to this and doing some of the other exercises and things like that. And especially, I guess I better reread my profile and read the one that really is me instead of the one that was somebody else. So it's a great book. Discover Your Purpose by Rhys Thomas. Rhys, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, Susan, that was awesome.
Yeah, and I'm just going to end with, and so it is, namaste.